Recapping here. Today, I'm going to explain a biographical crime drama film called Molly's Game, which is based on a true story. Spoilers ahead. Watch out and take care. Molly Bloom recounts her early life as a young and up-and-coming mogul skiing competitor. When Molly was young, she had a severe back condition called rapid-onset scoliosis, marked by a sideways curvature of the spine. Molly went into surgery and had her spine corrected using metal wires. The doctor advised her and her parents never to take up skiing again. Still, they disregarded the advice, and in the following year, she went back and even qualified for the U.S. skiing team. In a qualifying event for the 2002 Winter Olympics, Molly gets severely injured due to an unforeseen turn of events when a pine bough broke the bindings on her skis, causing her to fly uncontrollably through the air. The landing broke the reinforcements in her spine, forcing her to go through intensive surgery. Afterward, she was never able to ski again. The magnitude of the events, along with her overbearing father, only weighed heavily on the girl. Longing to escape a life of rigidity and enjoy some of her youth, Molly decided to take a year off law school and travel to L.A. During these days, she found a job as a cocktail waitress at a bar called Nacional nightclub. Here, she was tasked to keep trying to sell more expensive alcohol to the customers. One evening in the nightclub, she meets Dean Keith. Dean is a partner at Black Hughes Investments, and he has taken a liking to Molly. This lands her a second job as his personal assistant. He continually pesters her with his boorish and demanding attitude, but Molly maintains her composure, continuing to behave as a consummate professional should. One day, Dean assigns Molly to set up a high-stakes poker game with Dean's celebrity friends. Surprised by his star-studded list of contacts, Molly is eager to reach out to them. On the night of the game, Molly greets all 9 poker players as she hands their money for the game. She counts over $90,000 at the poker table in front of her, and that very poker table has an array of movie stars, film directors, rappers, and business titans. Needless to say, Molly is bewildered by the entire thing. When the game ended, all of the players each give Molly a tip, earning her a total of $3,000 in a single night. And it was at that moment that Molly knew her life would be heading a different turn. Molly decides to postpone law school for one more year to regularly run the games for Dean Keith at the Cobra Lounge. Molly has since then dedicated herself to learning everything there is to learn about this world she found herself in. She buys a dress that makes her look nothing like herself, and she even starts listening in on the conversations during the games, which became bigger and bigger with more and more guests. One of the regulars, a movie star that Molly calls Player X for anonymity, consistently wins the most money during the games. Molly has decided that if she's going to make it big, she will have to team up with this man. Molly then tries her best to find more guests that would be stupid and willing to spend a large enough amount of money. She then goes to Nacional nightclub, promising the waitresses a certain amount of pay if they send her a guest at the poker game. She does this for the local casino and approaches the pit boss, asking him to send players in exchange for a share of the money. Several games later, Dean Keith starts feeling uneasy about his current financial situation. One night during a game, Dean steps out of the room with Molly and tells her that he will have to stop paying her for her job as an office assistant, especially since she makes enough in tips. Molly protests, but Dean threatens to fire her from the job and the game if she disagrees. Forced to comply, Molly puts a plan in place to make sure she won't lose the game she fully expects in the near future. Molly rents a suite at an expensive hotel and sets up the place to be better than the Cobra Lounge. One night, Molly receives a call from Dean telling her that she's fired. But life goes on for Molly, and the next morning, she retrieves her things from Dean's office, only to set up her game at the Beverly Hills Hotel that evening. She invites all of the regulars and the guests. Before proceeding with the game, Molly makes an announcement for the confused players, promising that there would be no hard feelings if they preferred to play in the Cobra Lounge. Player X, the game's biggest hotshot and Molly's friend, looks at her and says, "Let's play." From then on, Molly has successfully taken the game away from Dean Keith. As time passes by, Molly grows more acclimated to her role. Despite her avoidance of any romantic or intimate involvement with the players, Molly continues to receive several advances from them. One evening, Player X tells Molly to raise the stakes to a $50,000 buy-in. Molly is hesitant at first, explaining that it'd be difficult to find players who had the money to lose that much, but at Player X's insistence, Molly starts recruiting again. Among the recruits was Donnie Silverman, the man who won the World Series of Poker the previous year. Player X is shocked that Molly would invite him, but Molly goes on to explain Donnie's vulnerabilities and patterns of behavior. With malicious intent, Player X asserts that while he doesn't like playing poker, he likes destroying people's lives. With that, he instructs Molly to give Donnie a seat at the table. The next recruit she has lined up is Brad Marion, known to the table as Bad Brad for his notoriously bad poker skills, if you could even call it skill. Through the several weeks of consistent losses, Molly begins to take pity on Brad. She even tries to dissuade him from playing, or at the very least, offer him a book or a poker lesson. However, it's revealed that Brad knew what he was doing all along. He intentionally loses $100,000 every week, only to gain $4 million later on. Another player is Harlan Eustace, with whom Molly feels uneasy. She can't pinpoint where he gets his money from. Over time, Molly has taken a liking to Harlan, even though the source of his money remains a mystery. One particular evening, Harlan is winning at the table with his excellent card skills. However, things take a sudden turn when Brad Marion goes up against him. Harlan miscalculates during the final hand when he's led to believe that Brad has a winning set, making him fold. Since Harlan has never played with Brad before, he doesn't know how terrible he is with cards. And in truth, Brad has no idea what he's doing. When Harlan saw Brad's cards after the game, he realizes that Brad had absolutely nothing all this time. Though he had only lost a relatively small amount during that hand, the minor defeat sends Harlan spiraling into a tilted disposition. Because of this, Harlan plunges himself into a crazed gambling frenzy, recklessly tossing his winnings to regain some of his lost pride. By the end of the night, Harlan owes Molly $1.2 million. Harlan leaves for home, and Molly tells him they'll talk about the money the following day. However, this doesn't happen because Harlan hands Molly a check for the $1.2 million the following week. Finally, Player X confesses that he was funding Harlan the entire 2 years he's played there and that he earns 50% of Harlan's winnings. Upon hearing this, Molly is outraged, and she asserts that what he did isn't allowed since that setup can let him manipulate the game in his favor, while Player X is adamant that what he's doing isn't cheating. A falling out ensues between them, and Molly knows that this can only spell trouble. Player X has stopped showing up at Molly's game the following week, and he brought with him all the other players. With the game taken away from Molly, she falls into a brief period of misery. After 2 weeks without her beloved routine, Molly decides to take a plane to New York. There, she gathers information from the locale about the biggest running poker games in the city. One of the women she meets tells her that the biggest game is in Brooklyn, where most participants are Russian Jews. After laying down the groundwork, she proceeds to build a poker game from scratch with the help of her new friends, and in a few months, Molly is running the biggest game in the entire world. However, things begin to turn sour when one of the players cheated by bringing in fake poker chips, which Molly caught onto. Because of this, one of her new dealers named B suggests that she should take a rake. A rake in poker refers to a certain percentage of money that the cardroom host takes from the pot, and this is how most gambling houses generate revenue. However, it is considered illegal in most jurisdictions to take a rake if the operations don't have a gaming license like casinos do. And since Molly is operating her business at a private dwelling and not an official gambling house, she doesn't have a gaming license. One evening, as the big game is underway, Molly realizes that the stakes are irrevocably high. She wouldn't be able to afford to pay a large amount of money if someone were to win big. This is when she signals to dealer B, who quickly takes in 2% of the pot. With this move, Molly has now made her game illegal. One of the players in Molly's game is the dopey and drunk Douglas Downey. Every night after the game, Douglas would hang around and speak with Molly while she's checking the books. In one of his drunken speeches, Douglas mentions the Brooklyn game, where the Russian Jews played recklessly and always paid up front. This information comes in handy when later on, Douglas accumulates an $80,000 debt to Molly. Capitalizing on the opportunity, Molly tells Douglas to invite some of those Russians to the game, and in exchange, she'll let him play until he's able to pay the $80,000. The following week, the Russians arrive. They consist of Mike Davidoff, brothers Ilya and Alexei Gershon, and Shelly Habib. Just as the rumors promise, the Russians play recklessly, lose unabashedly, and pay up instantly. During this time, Brad Marion had been indicted for running a Ponzi scheme, causing Molly to be investigated and questioned about who attended her games. Bit by bit, her days in New York become more and more disenchanting. Molly drops further into her drug addiction, depression starts to plague her, and she becomes sick of running games for greedy men. One day, members of the Italian mafia approach Molly as they seek to partner with her. The mafia reports that they know many of her players haven't paid their debts to her, which now amount to $2.8 million. Given her predicament, they then offer to extort the money from these non-paying players. When Molly declines, she is attacked by a burly Italian man in her apartment. He steals the money she has on hand and coerces her into a partnership with them. Injured and alone, Molly stays in her apartment for the next 2 weeks, waiting for the Italian mafia's call. Eventually, she finds out that 125 mafia members have been recently arrested in a big raid. Because of this fortunate turn of events, Molly decides to run a week of big, epic games to win back the $2.8 million that she lost to unpaid debt. But as she's making her way to the game, the FBI seizes the entire operation thanks to Douglas Downey, who acted as their informant. Despite this sharp turn, Molly leaves relatively unscathed. Because Douglas is in love with her, he refrained from giving the authorities Molly's name. This allows her to escape, but the ordeal leaves her with nothing as the FBI seized all her assets. Left with no other options, Molly goes to the airport and returns home to live with her mother. 2 years later, Molly has moved out. She publishes a book where she names a few individuals who played in her games, mainly those who have already been identified during Brad Marion's indictment. The FBI eventually arrests Molly and charges her for her involvement in illegal gambling with the mafia. She enlists the help of Charlie Jaffe, a high-profile and expensive lawyer in New York. Though her case looks bleak, Charlie agrees to help her, especially after learning that she's been protecting her players, particularly the innocent people who have been affected by her poker games. Despite the trouble they gave her, she refused to use extortion to collect her debt, though the opportunities always presented itself to her. With Charlie's help, the two of them try to prove to the court that, apart from her taking a rake, she has no involvement whatsoever in the crime syndicates arrested during one of her games. Because of this, they argue that she doesn't deserve imprisonment. During the legal proceedings in New York, Molly's father, Larry, visits her. Knowing the emotional scars he left Molly during her formative years, he tries to make amends with his daughter. Larry admits that he treated her differently from her brothers because she knew of his affairs. Filled with both anger and distress, he breaks down crying and he tells Molly how devastated he was to learn that a mafia member beat her up. He even promises to make the man who put his hands on her suffer. Charlie negotiates a deal for Molly to have her money back and be exempt from a prison sentence. In exchange, they want the hard drives and digital records she kept from her games. Though this could very well be the answer to all her problems, Molly still turns down the deal. She fears that the information about her players would be released, greatly affecting these people's lives. During the hearing, the judge arrives at the conclusion that Molly has only committed non-serious crimes. Because of this, she's sentenced to a mere 200-hour community service, 1-year probation, and a $200,000 fine. As the Bloom family and Charlie celebrate her victory, Molly begins to realize how knee-deep in debt she is. She owes the government nearly $2 million, she has $250,000 in legal bills, she's a felon, and for some reason, she's not allowed to go to Canada. Despite all this, Molly remains optimistic after surviving everything. From being on top of the world to trudging through a hell's cape, Molly learns that she's very hard to kill. Subscribe for more videos like this, turn on notifications, and leave a like, it really helps our channel. Thank you for watching.